Carter Page is a former advisor to Donald Trump in foreign affairs and those sorts of issues, and he's back in the news right now following revelations about the FBI's ongoing investigation into his activities. And now there's actually a new wrinkle to the story. But first, why are we talking about Carter Page again? Well, the Washington Post reported this week that the FBI obtained a warrant to monitor Page's communications back last summer over suspicions that he was acting as an agent of foreign power. That statement actually downplays it a little bit. They submitted like this much documentation showing not just that he was acting as an agent, but that he was knowingly acting as an agent of foreign intelligence operatives. And so what he was getting up to at that point and afterward, who he was dealing with, what he was saying, incredibly important at this point. And now we're finding out a little bit more about it. So he was on with Jake Tapper, and he's been with other people in the news now, apparently trying to get his message straight in the media about what he discussed and what he didn't. And the possibility of dropping the sanctions against Russia came up. And he had some conflicting things to say about whether that came up in his conversations with foreign officials. You'll see in this video.
In any of these conversations with Russians, either in Russia or back here in the United States, did you ever suggest to any of them that President Trump, or candidate Trump, would be open to easing sanctions on Russia?
Absolutely not.
Never, not once?
I never offered that. No, nothing along those lines. Absolutely not. I mean, it may topics. I don't remember. We'll see what comes out in this FISA transcript. It's
well,
nice.
You know what you did.
Well, I don't recall every single word that I ever said, but I would never make any offer or intimate anything.
Have you ever conveyed to anyone in Russia that you think President Trump might have been more willing to get rid of the sanctions that were imposed against Russia after they invaded and seized Crimea?
Never any direct conversation such as that. I mean, look, it's.
What do you mean direct conversation? I don't know what that means. Direct conversation.
Well, I'm just saying no. That was never said. No.
But it sounds like from what you're saying, it's possible that you may have discussed the easing of sanctions.
Something may have come up in a conversation. I have no recollection, and there is nothing specifically that I would have done that would have given people that impression, George.
But you can't say without equivocation that you didn't discuss the easing of sanctions.
Someone may have brought it up. I have no recollection, and if it was not something I was offering or someone was asking for.
You never said that to anybody, that you think that if Donald Trump won, he might be willing to get rid of the sanctions against Russia.
No.
And any conversations about those emails that were stolen from the DNC, from the Clinton campaign? Any conversations about that?
Not a word.
Not once?
Not once.
Absolutely positive?
Absolutely sure.
One of the matters the FBI is investigating, as you know, is whether any advisor to the Trump campaign at any point discussed the release of the hacked and phished and stolen documents from the DNC and from Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta. Did you ever discuss any of those documents?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Did you ever discuss?
No advance warning. Yeah, I mean, people may have mentioned it after it came out, but or alluded to some of the findings, but no direct discussions. Absolutely not.
So how can you be sure you didn't talk about that, but you're not sure you didn't talk about easing of sanctions?
Well, that is, I mean, that didn't happen until a couple of weeks later, I believe, during the DNC.
Well, I mean, it was a couple weeks later. If you're talking about a year ago, you can remember something if it was a couple weeks later than a year ago. But if it was a couple weeks and a year ago, I mean, who remembers that? And what I love, Jake Tapper's interview technique right there is just ask him a question, let him begin talking, and just don't say anything. So he has to awkwardly fill the gap. And Carter Page, whatever else he does, and I would do the same thing. He can't hide when he's obviously trying, best case scenario, to speak very carefully because he knows that this is gonna end up in a trial. And worst case scenario, he's lying to you. He says, absolutely not. Well, I mean, I don't want to say, I don't recollect. I mean, it could have possibly happened. By the way, if something didn't happen, you say that it didn't happen. If you start saying I don't recollect, you are only allowed in reality to say that if you're lying. That's how recollection works.
And Tapper's question of, I don't really understand what you mean by directly.
Yeah, it's like that.
Directly. It's great.
Yeah, so look, it was a long time ago. It's okay to not remember necessarily, but it was his stammering and trying to come up with some way that he can say that he didn't say it, but also if it turns out that he did, and like the FBI maybe has a transcript or something like that, he can say, well, I said that I didn't recollect. I said not directly, I said I didn't offer it. That's very different than we didn't discuss it or it wasn't a possibility. It's such careful language wielded so uncarefully.
Also, he remembers.
I just wish that we finally had something like a bombshell in regard to Russia. Because like this slow, nonstop drip of Russia news is even fatiguing me. And I'm not one of these people who thinks, oh, this is like fear-mongering, McCarthyism, blah, blah. No, I think that there might be something there. But I find it so hard to believe that we still don't have like some solid, I don't know, reporting, evidence, whatever you want to call it, for what's been going on.
We don't have access to the raw intelligence, but that doesn't mean that there isn't raw intelligence, so that others haven't gotten access to it. So when politicians have gone in and been briefed on the information that's not privy to us, some of them have come out and said, no, there's something going on. Bernie Sanders is one of those.
Right.
He seems fairly convinced based on the information he's had access to. And look, the FBI said they don't just have communication between Carter Page and Russian operatives. They said, we have evidence that he knowingly functioned as an operative for them. The British came out, we're not even doing this as a full story. I know people love to say that we're hysterical, we cover every aspect of this. We weren't even gonna cover this, but the British intelligence agency said that back in 2015, they started noticing suspicious communication and alerted intelligence agencies in the US to it. The idea that the British intelligence back in 2015, before there'd been a single primary or any of that, were trying to protect Hillary Clinton after her loss, it's nonsense. I mean, this is a pattern of incredibly bizarre behavior. And yes, we're still waiting to find out the raw information, but it was convincing to the Brits over 2 years ago.
Right, and also, I mean, related is Paul Manafort and the reporting that we did about him, and by the way, he just registered as a foreign agent. Right.
We don't know exactly of which country for some reason. It could be Turkey or it could be the Ukraine or something like that.
Costa Rica.
Right.
It could be. Well, I mean, he previously worked for Turkey at least. Like it's a possibility.
That's true. It could be. The other thing is, it's being there are people reporting on this. There are people who are the reporters that are digging on this constantly. It hasn't been reported yet, but they are working their asses off to get this done. From the beginning, I always thought this was going to be a 9 to 15 month endeavor to try and get to the bottom of this. I still think that way, but I think the more doubt that's created, and goes back to what we were talking about before with Republicans and Trump, nothing's going to matter until Republicans start leaving the reservation. I think that's going to happen in due time. The more this stuff happens.
If you're a member of the Young Turks, you not only get the whole 2-hour Young Turks show on demand anytime you want, ad-free, but you also get so many other shows. Old School, you'll love it. Aggressive Progressive for guys who are true progressives. Now also Nerd Alert for gaming and tech. What to Flick for movie reviews. You will love it. Check it out right now at tytnetwork.com/join.